All right, well, welcome. Merry Christmas. I'm so excited we get to say that wherever you're joining us from. This is just an exciting time. If you are here with us at Henderson, just being here was a challenge, right? So you already made it. You're already winning. I'm so thankful you are here wherever you're joining us from. I hope it's an amazing day so far. The way I've been thinking about this morning is, if you're here, it's because you really want to be here. You know what I mean? Like you had to fight to get here, or you really need to be here. And some of us, this time every week is like we need this. We need to be around each other. We need to gather around the Word. And so if you do have your Bible, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 2. That's the story we're going to share from today. It's a familiar story, but we want to come at it fresh. But as you're getting there, let me ask you a question. Have you ever gotten yourself into a bind where you legitimately thought, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this? You legitimately thought, like, man, this is going to be a bad day. If you haven't been there, or maybe you have, and it's bringing scary moments, let me tell you a fun or funny moment in my own life. This happened to our family a couple weeks ago, actually a couple months ago. I grew up in Savannah. I love the coast. I love the just living by the water, being on the water. So we got a chance to go out on a boat a couple months ago. And growing up in Savannah does not guarantee that you're a good boat captain. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but that's what happens. So anyways, my family and I, we got out on a boat, and we're like, we're going to live it up. I should have said, hey, let's do this another day. When at the dock, they said, hey, it's pretty rough out there, right? And I was like, you know what? I grew up in Savannah. Like, I know what I'm doing. I love the sun on my face. I love the wind blowing through my hair. I mean, I love all of it. And so we should have stopped right there. But anyways, we go out. The water's pretty rough, and we're pushing through. We get to this island, and we try to anchor out there. And if you're boat people, you know this is the make or break moment of your trip. But if you're not familiar, we came out there at high tide. And that means that it's turning now towards low tide, which means when you anchor, you have to keep moving. You have to get far from the shore because you're going to look up in 30 minutes and your boat is going to be stuck on the sand. And so we were like, that's not going to happen. And so we try to anchor out. There's a guy who looked at us and obviously thought they have no clue what they're doing. So he helped us initially get anchored. And so we're just kind of trying to enjoy ourselves. But then the worst thing happens, okay? We go to move the boat one time, to move the anchors out a little bit deeper, and oh my goodness, the wind was blowing one way, the water's moving another way. It felt like things were pushing. I couldn't control this thing. Next thing I know, this boat is on the sand. And I'm like, we have minutes. We have minutes to get this thing off of the sand. Now, mind you, here's what this actually means. If we get stuck on this beach, it is 10 plus hours before we are moving. Do you know what I mean? And I could not handle 10 plus hours of my wife's disappointment. And so I went into freak out mode. I was like, we got to do anything and everything to get this on the boat. And honestly, there were a group of folks that were at the beach, and they came running over because they could see. And if you actually go to the church and you were there, you can vouch for this. I turned into a crazy person. I was like yelling at the boat. I was yelling prayers. I was yelling at my kids. I was like, we got to get this off. My kids kept bringing sticks and stuff. And they're like, let's take this home. I'm like, stop bringing sticks to the boat. And then I was like, actually, give me that stick. And we're all like trying to crank this thing, push it away from the shore. We were doing anything and everything we could to get this thing off of the sand. And by God's grace, some folks showed up. I don't know if they're angels. They might have been. But we all kind of push and try to lift it. I mean, it felt impossible, and by God's grace, it broke free, and then we enjoyed a cold ride back to the dock with very few words. You know what I mean? We were stuck, and it was about to get bad if something didn't happen. And if those folks didn't show up, we were going to be in a mess. Listen, the story we get into is one of these kind of moments. The feeling in this story is, man, they're about to get stuck. And if God does not show up, if God does not provide exactly what they need, it could mean life or death for them. It wasn't just going to mean 10 hours on a beach somewhere, which you look back and you go, that sounds kind of nice now. But in the moment, it felt like we were stuck. So that's what Matthew 2 is about. So again, turn there. We're going to jump into this story. This is where the Magi come and meet Jesus and his family. And if you know this story, I want to challenge you. Try to hear it fresh. And the way you do that is you start to see yourself in the story, okay? Try to put yourself in these scenes as we walk through it. Matthew 2, we're going to start in verse 1. Here's what it says. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Now just put yourself in this reality. Say you're like overseeing a booth in Jerusalem, all right? You're selling flowers or cuts of meat or whatever, and you look up and you see this entourage of foreigners from the east in royal garb, and all of a sudden you're just going like, what is happening here today? And the question they ask is, who is the newborn king? Where is he? And in your mind you're going, there's been no king born here recently. And so let's get a little bit deeper into the story. Let's walk through some of the characters. King Herod. Many of you know him or have at least heard about him because of this story. We know a few things. First off, we know he's insane. He was in charge. He was experiencing a lot of power in Jerusalem, and power goes to his head. It poisoned his mind to the point where he turned into a madman. He would do anything and everything to stay in power. We also know that he died in 4 BC, all right? So if you're looking in the timeline, Jesus had to be born before that. The guy who said, hey, we're going to count all the years forever according to the day that Jesus was born, missed it by a couple years. And so, I'm sure he feels really bad about that, but, we're all stuck with it. So we do run into another Herod later in Jesus' life, in his ministry. That's Herod Antipas. Same family, different guy, but Herod the Great is one of the key figures in this story. Second group is the Magi from the east. Now, one of the commentaries I read said, in the New Testament, the word Magi being used here refers to possessors of secret wisdom. In our passage, it probably connotes these are astrologers, men who gained special insight into our world affairs through the observation of planets and stars. Hence, the common translation, wise men. All right? So best we can tell, this is a group of magi, a group of wise men from Babylon, having been influenced by Daniel and his leadership over 400 years earlier. Now, if you remember, Daniel was lived in Israel. When Babylon came in and conquered Israel, he was then captured and kind of removed and moved to Babylon. But because of who he was, because of his character, because of his competency, he was then given some pretty high levels of authority there. Look in Daniel 2:48. Look at what the king says about him. Then the king, Nebuchadnezzar, placed Daniel in a high position, lavished many gifts on him, and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. That is wild for a Jewish boy to then oversee the entire province of Babylon. But then look at this. He also placed him in charge of all its wise men. So for 400 years, Daniel, an Israelite, has been influencing this group of wise men to keep their eyes open for when God shows up. Think of how amazing this story is. It goes way back before any of what we're reading about here. What's amazing to me about this part of the story is that there's a group of people watching, waiting in Babylon for God to show up, while at the same time, the people in Jerusalem, God's chosen people, almost missed the birth of the Messiah. It took a group of folks from Babylon to help them see this. This is an amazing part of the story. So you got King Herod, crazy guy. He's a madman in the city. Heads up, hold that. Then you have these magi walking to the city. Finally, let's talk about his star. The magi say, we have seen his star. He owns that. He identifies it. Up to this point in the story, we've seen God do some pretty miraculous things, right? Angels showing up in bedrooms saying like, hey, heads up, you guys are going to get pregnant. There's an old couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth. They're able to miraculously have a child who they give birth to John. We know it's John the Baptist. An angel shows up to Mary, says God's going to use you miraculously to give birth to the Messiah. It's a virgin birth. It's going to be something that only God's hand could happen. So when it comes to the appearance of a star in the sky, It could be that God just, as a supernatural event, made this happen as he's welcoming his Messiah into the world. God could have orchestrated that miraculously. But there are also some other ideas as to what exactly is the star that the Magi saw. N.T. Wright, he's a well-known New Testament scholar. I love his stuff. I would encourage you to read any of his stuff. But here's what he says about the star. You know, Halley's Comet appeared between 12 and 11 BC, but that would have been too early for this story, so it's probably not that. Or it could have been some kind of supernova, all right? Very well could have been. But look at this. More likely is the fact that the planets Jupiter and Saturn were in conjunction with each other 3 times in 7 BC. So if you're like me, you get a little confused by years. In BC, we're counting backwards. So 7 BC, Herod dies 3 years later. In 4 BC, Jesus is born. Before that, obviously. So 7 BC. Since Jupiter was the royal or kingly planet, and Saturn was sometimes thought of to represent the Jews, the conclusion was obvious. A new king of the Jews was about to be born. And so either way you look at this, all right, enough nerding out for the moment, but either way you look at this, whether God, as a supernatural phenomenon, kind of makes this thing happen by placing a star in the sky, or, think about it this way, from the time he set the universe in motion, he timed these planets to align with the birth of his son. Either way you look at it, God's hand is miraculously, intentionally, and amazingly involved in what is happening at this moment. As Psalm 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. Even in the sky, God's making it known he's doing something in our world. And this kind of activity always warrants a response. That's what the Magi did. They packed up their things, so they start moving. We're heading towards Jerusalem. But here's what I think Matthew wants us to feel from this opening, all right? These first 2 verses, all of that information, here we go. This is what Matthew wants you to feel. The true king has finally come. He's here. He is God's Messiah. Jesus is God's Messiah, and his kingdom extends way beyond Israel. Just from these first few verses, we realize Jesus is the true king, but he's the true king for all people. And this is where the clash of kingdoms really begins. Look at verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When those in political power are disturbed, everybody else tends to feel it. That's what happened in Jerusalem. So when he called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. And so they say, in Bethlehem in Judea, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. Now in this, I think there's a hidden insight, all right? Here you have the Magi. They see the star in the sky. They see this, amazing, thing happening. And so they respond. They move towards it. But eventually it's God's word that gets them where they need to go. You know, sometimes we kind of acknowledge that, man, God's showing up in my life. God's bringing relationships in my life. He's orchestrating events to help me get to where I need to go. But eventually, it is going to be his word that is the final say. It is his word that is the ultimate guide for us, getting us where we need to go. And so just hold on to that as you walk through your life. Now, the irony of this story is that Herod is the one who ultimately gives the Magi the directions on where to find this newborn Messiah. Verse 7, then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, report back to me so that I too may go and worship him. I think he's kind of putting on a little bit here. But there's some clues that we get from this story at this point. That the Magi are showing up probably later than when Jesus was born. So when they show up, they're probably going to find a small child, not in a stable or a cave, but living in a home there in Bethlehem, trying to figure out how to live life here and now. Now, the last thing I want to say about the Magi, we get this idea that they were kings from Isaiah 60, verse 10. It says, nations are going to come to your light, the kings to the brightness of your dawn. So this idea of, oh, these kings have come to worship Jesus, or if you're just a modern person like us, the old Christmas hymn, We Three Kings. That's how we think of these guys. The Christmas song said it, so that's probably what it was. But these guys were probably not kings, but more so like king makers, okay? They were the wise men who surrounded the throne, who supported and kind of helped these royal families along the way. So they were quite familiar with royalty. And so I say this all to say, when Herod tries to fool these guys with his charade, these are literally called wise men. Like, I don't think they're going to fall for it. I don't think he's going to accomplish what he's looking for. Verse 9, look at this. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. This is one of these moments when I don't know if you ever think about this, like one day in heaven, I can't wait to see how this played out. You know, all right, God, show me what you did with the star. What was that actually like? We don't have enough to really know, but we know God's hand is all over this. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. This phrase, I love this phrase, but it's a bit of an understatement. Because in the Greek, the literal translation is, they rejoiced with great joy exceedingly. It's like the author was trying to go like, how do I put into words what these guys were feeling? After this long journey, after this time of seeing God do something amazing in the sky and then packing everything up and then moving across countless miles and finally showing up to the place where they believe that God's hand is at work. How do you explain what was going on? They were more than just overjoyed. Man, they rejoiced with great joy exceedingly. Here's what you need to see. It is joy that fueled the journey of the Magi. Man, it was their joy that got them through this. Every storm they had to walk through, every desert valley they had to kind of navigate through, every fearful night, every kind of enemy that came against them, everything in this journey that they had to face, they counted worth it because of the joy of seeing what's on the other side of God showing up. It was joy that fueled this journey for the Magi. Verse 11, it says that on coming to the house, they saw the child with the mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Again, put yourself in this. Hold on. Put yourself in this. Here you've got Mary tending to the house, trying to make it feel like a home. You got baby Jesus eating dirt, if he's anything like my kids. And so they're here in the yard, a poor family, barely making it in an obscure town. And then this royal entourage files into this tiny city of Bethlehem. And each of these magi get off of their camels or whatever they came in on. They hit their knees and they get their face to the ground in front of this child. Put yourself in it. This is unheard of. This is wild. Then they opened their gifts, their treasures, and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then, having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. You see, what I want us to see in this story is God continues to provide for them. When events in their life seem to be out of control, you realize God has been orchestrating different things in them. So I just want to show you, God provides through three things in this story. First, he provides through unexpected guests. Like, this was an unexpected day when these guys show up at Jesus' house. Who would have imagined that God would use Daniel, a Jewish boy in exile in Babylon, to lay the groundwork for a group of people known as the wise men for 400 years in Babylon, to train them to anticipate and then acknowledge and then announce the birth of a Jewish king that would actually be the savior for the entire world? Who would have actually put all those pieces together? But God works through unexpected guests to fulfill his mission. These magi, that's who they were, unexpected guests, but more than welcome to be a part of what God's doing in the world. I don't know where you're at. You might feel like, I'm an unexpected guest here. I would have never seen myself in a church. There's no way that God has a part of this story for me. And they just need to know. He uses unexpected folks all the time to be a part of his unstoppable mission, what he's doing in our world. Don't cut yourself out too soon. He uses unexpected guests. He used unexpected gifts to provide. If the Bible had not been written or told us that these magi were from the east, I would have assumed they're from the south. Because in the south, when you show up anywhere, what do you have in your hand? A gift. You show up anywhere for the first time, most likely it's baked goods. And so it's a sweet gift. I have been on the receiving side of a lot of these sweet, unexpected gifts this season. Man, listen, my heart is happy, so thank you for that. My doctor is disappointed, so we're all guilty in this, I guess. At least that's what I tell myself. But a lot of times when you read this story, you think about the Magi, they brought gold and frankincense and myrrh, and so we spend a lot of time going like, okay, what does that mean? All right, what does it mean that he brought gold, and what does it mean about frankincense and myrrh? And I love that. I feel like you should dig into that, go as far as you want. Don't get caught up on that, okay? Here's what I think Matthew's trying to get us to see. When the Magi saw God show up with an announcement in the sky, they then thought, what is a gift appropriate for a king? They're sitting in their secret place, amazed that God would reveal this thing to them. And I think they were just thinking, what is appropriate to show up and give a king? That's what they packed, and that's what they carried all the way to Bethlehem. A gift that is just right for a king. But this is how God works. He uses unexpected gifts through unexpected guests to provide for an unexpected getaway. You see, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, they didn't realize how things were about to turn out. Look at verse 13. When they had gone, the Magi, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. He said, get up. He said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for this child to kill him. Moms, that's a scary dream, right? Dads, that's a scary dream. That'll wake you up, even me, and I sleep through a lot of things. But just in short, if an angel ever tells you to do something in a dream, I think you should just do it. That's what I'm learning from this. So he got up, took the child and his mother. During the night, they left for Egypt, where they stayed until the death of Herod. And so they fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. So you see two things at work right here. On one hand, I hope you're picking this up. On one hand, God has been orchestrating this story of redemption. Like there's nothing that's going to stop him from doing what he's working towards. This story of redemption through Jesus, that the world is broken and it needs a savior. It needs someone to rescue them and redeem and restore things. And so God's been orchestrating events to make this moment happen. But at the same time, God continues to use different people and invite them to be a source of his provision. Invite them to play a role in what God is doing. God used the Magi, listen to this. God used the Magi to provide for an unexpected escape to Egypt. How in the world would a poor family like Joseph and Mary and Jesus living in Bethlehem ever make the journey to Egypt? Unless Magi show up with gifts like gold and frankincense and myrrh. They funded the very escape that they needed. This is why we can trust God. We don't always see what he's up to, but we can trust him. This is why we experience joy to the world, because we know, for those of us who follow Jesus, if we're on his side, we are in a very good place. You see, God is the Father who will always provide for his people, and he will perpetuate his mission. This is what he does. He's always going to provide for you. He's always going to show up. He's always going to continue working towards what is best. So the big question I want us to wrestle with is, who are you in this story? As you read this story, where do you fit? What role would you be playing if God, in what God is doing in this story? And so I want to just kind of give you some thoughts here. First off, are you like Herod You know, when you think of the idea of following Jesus, do you immediately get defensive for your little kingdom? You know, let me just spare you. We all do. That's all of us. We all get offended that we need it. We all have an ego problem that needs to get sorted out. I love how Timothy Keller says, you know what? There's a little Herod in all of us. We all have to deal with this. We don't like the idea of submitting ourselves to someone else's way. We live every day fighting to keep our kingdom standing. We're like a child on the coast where we've built our little sand castle and we're trying to protect it from the waves. And look, it's not going to stand. It's not going to last. That little Herod in all of us has to be dealt with. We have to do something about that. And please remember this. Let this story be a parable for you about your life. Living the little Herod life will make you mad. It is exhausting. It'll drive you to insanity. It'll drive you to destruction. There is no life lived that way. It hurts, and it won't last. So, I think, are you like Herod? You got that little Herod in you fighting for your kingdom? Or are you like one of the Magi? Remember the first question they asked when they showed up on the scene? They said, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So let's just for the sake of the rest of our time, let's just have that heart. Let's be more like the Magi. Let's imitate some of the things that they did. And I want to share 3 things that we see in this story that I want you to just kind of pick up. The first thing they do is they seek truth. They seek what is true. When you see God align the stars in a way that catches your attention, if you're a Magi, you do something about it. Just as a reminder, the Magi were the smart kids in school. You know what I mean? Like, these are the guys, like the teacher's teaching and then looks at these guys and they're like, am I doing okay? You know, like, that's who they were. And they had a religion. They didn't believe in the God of the Jews. They had all kinds of systems of theology and belief and practice that were separate from the God of the Jews. But when they recognized that God was doing something special in the world, when they recognized God's doing something special in their world, think about this for a moment. They're focused. They gave their attention to the stars. And so what did God do? Met them through the stars. One thing that I think that tells us is, I don't know where your attention is. I don't know what you're focused on. But my guess is God's willing to meet you there. He's willing to meet you where your attention is and say, hey, there's something better going on. Hey, there's truth that you should seek after. There's something powerful that you need to get to know. And when they recognized that God was doing something special in their world, where they gave their attention, they had to do something about it. Now look, I get that belief can be a barrier for a lot of us, right? If we're honest with ourselves, we have to wrestle with questions like, how do you believe in a God you can't even see? Right? Anybody ever wrestled with that one? Or if God's real, why does he allow certain things to happen? Listen, these are important questions. All of us have to fight through these. That's why belief can feel like such a struggle. And I love that you feel like this is a safe place to wrestle with these things and begin figuring out, okay, what do I really believe about Jesus, about where my hope lies, about is there life beyond the... I love that you feel safe here. It's an encouragement to me. But I do want to challenge you on something. All right? My guess is that you need to become intellectually honest with yourself. There might be things that you believe about Jesus that are just not true. That could come from all kind of things. You grew up in a church, they said something, they did something, they taught you something, and you realize that's not true, and you ran from it, and you've been running ever since. I get that. There are a lot of us that carry some strange or significant church hurt with us. Maybe at college they asked the question, they kind of showed you that you were wrong in this way or that way, and so all of a sudden you're just like, I'm going to go into hiding. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to mention I'm a Christian. I'm not going to live. Whatever it is that's a barrier for your faith, I do think it's time to get intellectually honest, though. Is what you believe about Jesus actually true? Because if I were to guess, some of it isn't. And you probably have a hunch that what you believe about him isn't true either. So I know that it's not very popular to follow Jesus today, especially not in our culture, but pay attention to what the story is showing us. All right, look at what's happening. If God is in fact real, he will meet you where you are, and he will provide for you. He will meet you where you are, and he will take on the responsibility of providing what you need. Not providing everything you want. That's a little different. But he will provide exactly what you need when you need it. So listen, he's worth looking into. He's worth exploring. That's what the Magi did. They devoted themselves to seeking truth. Here's the second thing they did. They worshiped Jesus. They came to a point where they would worship Jesus. When they got to the end of their search for truth, I love the picture of this story. When they end their journey of seeking for truth, they found Jesus. That's who they found. And if you're honest with yourself and you really want to know what is true, guess what? You will land on Jesus. You will eventually find him. You've got to consider who he is. But when they discovered that, they worshiped him. This is where what's going on the inside, what you believe in your head and your heart, eventually starts to come out. It means that if you believe Jesus is God, you believe that he is the Savior, you believe everything that he says about himself is true, then that eventually starts to work its way out. For the Magi, what that looked like is they hit their knees. These Magi from the east got on their face before a child because what was going on the inside came out. That's what they did in response to worship. It was an act of honor and submission. So they're saying in their actions, this is the true king. Jesus is the true king. And for you today, that might look like worshiping Jesus might look like worshiping with your hands up. I get some of us worship like this, and that's okay. I get that. That's okay. But some of us, we might, maybe some of us are like one hand first. I can't do two hands. That's too much. But whatever's on the inside starts to come out. Like I surrender. Jesus, you're Lord and I'm not. That's all this means. You're greater. I'm not. Less of me, more of you. That's what this means. It might mean that you start worshiping that way when we sing. It might mean that you worship by making a decision to follow Jesus. That you know he's real. You just haven't had the courage to take a step yet and let everybody else know that you know that. And so maybe you need to be baptized as a public confession that Jesus is Lord and he's my Savior. If you haven't taken that step, man, come on, follow him. Be a part of this. Another way that the Magi worshiped Jesus was through their generosity. It was their worship that led them to bring him gifts. They wanted to honor him in this way. So this is the last thing. Live generously. If we're going to imitate what they did, we want to live generously. I love this time of year because I love seeing my kids get all into Christmas. You know what I mean? If you have kids, you might catch some of this. If you don't, it just becomes, as a dad, you love seeing this because they love giving gifts to other people now. And it's mostly our money, but that's okay. And so right now, here's what they're currently doing. They're planning a secret Santa party for our family. I'm like, isn't that what Christmas Day is about? And they're like, no, this is different. We already bought everybody gifts. We want to do a secret Santa party just for us. I'm like, okay, whatever. So they wrote names out on pieces of paper. They wrote down the gifts that they want. They tore it all up. They put it in a hat. We all drew names, and they all shared which names they have. And they're now currently working to get better deals out of their gifts from the people that they got. So they don't really understand the secret part of Secret Santa. But as a dad, here's the thing. I just love that my kids want to be generous. I love seeing them go, what can I give that's going to be the perfect gift for them? That's what the Magi did. And when you live generously, it does two things. One, when you live generously, it just lets someone else know you're thinking about them. Like when we just gave away a bunch of hot chocolate, cups for people. We have plenty more, so grab those, invite your one. If you're new, what we've been doing is we're inviting someone we want to bring with us to church. We're giving them hot chocolate, and we're bribing them to come to church. That's kind of our strategy here. No. If you, at the very least, you get a cup of hot chocolate. But what the heart is, we want to invite you with this little gift and say, come sit with me on Christmas Eve. Man, come join me. I'm thinking about you. It's a little gift. It's a little gift, and I hope you'll grab them on the way out. We still have plenty more. It's a little gift, but what does it do? It says, I'm thinking about you. I want you to be with me. That's a powerful thing. Generosity is a powerful thing. What else? Generosity. When you live generously, this is how God provides for others. Think about that. This is how you play a role in God's work to provide for others. It was through the generosity of the Magi that God provided funds for the escape to Egypt, right when they needed it, right when they were stuck, right when it was like life or death. Like the next day, Herod is coming to destroy life or any other king in this community. And right when they needed it, God provided exactly what they needed through an unexpected group of guests. You see, as Christians, our generosity is how we participate in God's provision. It's an awesome thing to be a part of. This is not a have-to thing. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, we have to give this offering. We have to do these things. No. It's a get to. We get to be a part of what God is doing in this world. And that's why today is actually a really special thing for us. You know, we've talked about a seat at the table for several weeks now. This is where we take our Christmas offering, and the whole goal is to create a seat at the table for our Bluffton campus. If you've got friends that live in other places and you love your church, and you say, hey, I want you to come with me to Christmas Eve services, and they have to drive 45 minutes away, that's a hard sell for a lot of folks. So we just decided we're going to where your friends are. We're going to launch campuses wherever your friends are, so that when you say, hey, come with me, there's a place close to them to experience a life-changing relationship with Jesus. But this offering is a sacrifice. It's a form of worship. It requires us to give something that we want for something we want way more. You know, if you're new around here, this is a part of who we are. Generosity is like right at the center of this because we want to make sacrifices. We want to live generously so that people who don't know Jesus will experience a life-changing relationship with him. And so with that, I want to share a little video here to show kind of what's been going on in Bluffton, and then we're going to kind of participate in this really special moment together. So take a look at this.
Well, you know, the story of the Bluffton campus began 20 years ago when Compassion had the conviction to reach not just the local community, but the whole Lowcountry. And so that led them to plant an independent church in Bluffton, South Carolina. And that church served in incredible ways for many years, despite all the challenges like tear down and set up. But they knew that they needed a permanent location as well in order to reach this community. And so they purchased an amazing piece of land right here in the heart of Old Town Bluffton. And so today we have the opportunity to carry that vision forward as a campus of Compassion Christian Church to reach this whole area. Well, the limitations of our current facility is simply that it takes so much effort to get it set up and torn down every single week rather than building and equipping each other up for the calling that God's put on us. You know, Bluffton is the fastest growing community in all of South Carolina. We've seen God bring so many new families and new people in this year, and we're already almost at capacity. A permanent place will generate momentum as we reach this community because it shows people that we are here and we are committed. We are not just inviting them into the idea of a church, but we're inviting them into a community that's going to be here for the long haul. You know, we're so excited to be the 7th campus launched as part of Compassion. A seat at the table has been our strategy all along, to where we launched campuses knowing that we wanted to go into other communities in this Lowcountry in order to be the church and to see God change lives. You know, the seat at the table for me, it's an invitation. It's the same invitation that Jesus gave originally when he invited everybody to come to him, saying there's a place in his family. And so we get an opportunity to provide a literal seat at the table to join this church community as we're following Jesus. One of the great privileges to be part of Compassion is to be part of the mission to lead people to a life-changing relationship with Jesus. And that's exactly what we're already seeing happen as part of this Bluffton campus. Now, we know that a life-changing relationship with Jesus doesn't happen through a building. It happens when lives intersect and we look up and we acknowledge what Jesus has done for us. I'm excited for how this building will just put fuel into that mission and we can see lives change as we come together. So I want to just say thank you to everyone who's part of the church, everyone who's given sacrificially and who will give sacrificially to make this happen. We really are one church in multiple locations. When we come together for a project like this, it just shows our heart to reach our community and also our world.